My husband laughed and said I was just good for cooking in front of 6 of his coworkers, 2 clients, and the woman from HR, who had already heard my name before he tried to make me small. He said it with one hand wrapped around a glass of wine and the other resting on the back of my chair, as if I were part of the furniture. Everyone gave the uncomfortable little laugh people use when a man has crossed a line, but no one wants to be the first person to say so. I smiled because after 14 years of marriage, I knew Evan Brooks loved an audience more than he loved an apology. What he did not know was that the menu he was bragging about that night, the vendor list his boss had praised that afternoon, and the cost-saving model that had just put his name in front of the executive team had all started at my kitchen table. 3 days later, at the biggest corporate dinner of his career, work finally made him regret laughing. Before I explain what happened that night, let me say this. If you have ever had someone shrink your talent into a joke because they needed to feel bigger standing beside you, stay with me. Because sometimes the thing they mock is the exact thing that tells the truth first. My name is Natalie Brooks. I was 41 years old when Evan decided to turn my life into a punchline at Marrow Lane's quarterly client dinner. He was 44, a senior account director in hospitality procurement, which is a polished way of saying he sold hotel groups. The idea that he knew how restaurants, retreats, banquets, and executive events should run. Evan did not cook. He did not price menus. He did not understand vendor lead times unless someone else put them in a calendar invite. He once confused a garnish minimum with a guest minimum and blamed the restaurant for using confusing language. But he could stand in a room with polished shoes and a confident smile and make people believe he had solved problems he had barely understood. For years, I helped him understand just enough. I had not always been the woman people saw next to him at dinners, quiet, well-dressed, careful with my words. Before our son Miles was born, I was a regional menu operations manager for a boutique hotel group that ran properties in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. My job was not simply food. It was timing, margins, labor hours, vendor reliability, dietary safety, sourcing problems, last-minute substitutions, health department standards, banquet flow, client experience, and the ugly math behind making a beautiful plate appear on time. Food is emotional when it lands on a table. Before that, it is logistics. I loved the work. I loved walking through a kitchen at 6 in the morning when the first trays of bread came out and the prep cooks were quiet because the day had not become chaos yet. I loved spreadsheets almost as much as I loved saucepans. I knew what a hotel could charge for a plated dinner without insulting the client, what a vendor could promise without lying, and how to design a menu that looked generous while keeping the margin alive. Then Miles was born early. Then Evan's mother got sick. Then my job required travel. Then every conversation in our house began with the word practical. At first, leaving my role was supposed to be temporary. Evan said, just until mom is stable. Then he said, just until Miles starts kindergarten. Then he said, you're so much better at home than you ever were with all that corporate nonsense. I should have heard the change in that sentence. Better at home was not gratitude. It was a cage with flowers around the bars. Still, for a long time, I did not resent the choice. I loved Miles. I loved caring for him. I loved being present. And I still cooked because cooking had always been one of the cleanest ways I knew to make order out of chaos. I cooked for my family. I cooked for school fundraisers. I cooked when Evan had clients over and wanted something casual but impressive. I cooked when his boss visited. I cooked when his team needed a menu concept, and Evan came home with panic hidden under charm. The first time he asked for professional help, he said it plainly. Nat, can you look at this proposal? I know you don't work in this world anymore, but you used to understand this stuff. Used to. I remember that word because I ignored it. He had a retreat proposal for a coastal resort client. The menu plan was expensive, clumsy, and impossible to execute with the kitchen staff they had. I stayed up until nearly 1 in the morning, rewriting the cost model, rebuilding the vendor list, and adding a seasonal option that reduced waste while making the client feel like they were getting something custom. Evan won the account. He came home with flowers and said, "You saved me." I believed him. The second time, he asked me to just glance at a spreadsheet. The third time, he needed me to call an old produce vendor because the one his team used had missed 3 deliveries. The fourth time, he asked if he could borrow my allergy-safe banquet protocol because a client had a child with a peanut allergy, and the hotel kitchen was nervous. Borrow is a gentle word people use when they already know they will not return what they take. Over the years, my kitchen table became Evan's silent department. He would spread out his laptop, printouts, and sticky notes after dinner. I would clear Miles's homework, move the salt shaker, and ask the questions his team should have asked before sending anything to a client. How many vegetarians? Is this plated or buffet? What is the server ratio? Is there a backup for dairy-free dessert? Who owns the service recovery if the vendor misses the 6-hour delivery window? Evan would sigh and say, "This is why you're good at this stuff." At home, good sounded like praise. At work, he made sure it sounded like his. I did not know how much of my work he was submitting under his own name until later. I knew he copied lines. I knew he used my templates. I knew he sometimes repeated my explanations, almost word for word, when he practiced presentations in the bathroom mirror. I told myself that marriage was not a courtroom. You did not demand citations from your husband every time he benefited from your brain. That was my mistake. The week everything broke started with an invitation printed on thick cream cardstock. Marrow Lane Group was hosting a private dinner for Briarstone Hotels, a regional chain of boutique properties that wanted to overhaul its executive retreat food program. Evan had been working on the pitch for months, or at least that was what he told everyone. He was unusually excited. He bought a new navy suit. He got a haircut 2 days early so it would not look freshly cut. He spent an entire Saturday afternoon practicing a speech in our bedroom while I roasted chicken downstairs and listened to him call my farm table revival concept his integrated regional sourcing model. Farm table revival was mine. I had developed it 8 years earlier when I was still with Merrick House Hotels. It was not just a pretty phrase, it was a system: seasonal substitutions, dual vendor sourcing, cost bands, allergy tagging, prep time blocks, and a service flow that let properties look local without letting every chef reinvent the wheel. I had used it once in a pilot program and saved a property group nearly 18% in food waste over 2 quarters. I had the original files on an old laptop in the cabinet under our printer. Evan had asked to see them 6 months earlier. "I just want inspiration," he had said. "Nothing formal?" Nothing formal became a pitch deck. The dinner where he laughed at me happened 3 nights before the Briarstone event. It was supposed to be informal, a smaller gathering at a wine bar downtown for Marrow Lane staff and a few visiting clients. Evan wanted me there because, as he put it, "You make me look stable." That should have bothered me more than it did. The wine bar had low lighting, brick walls, and tiny plates of food that cost too much for how quickly they disappeared. I wore a black dress with sleeves because Portland spring evenings pretend to be warmer than they are. Evan introduced me to his coworkers like a man presenting a well-maintained part of his personal brand. "This is Natalie, my better half." Then he would laugh, as if being married to me were one of his polished lines. Claire Donnelly, the VP of Client Partnerships, shook my hand and held it for half a second longer than expected. "Natalie Brooks," she said. "Have we met before?" "I don't think so." "You were with Merrick House, weren't you?" I felt Evan's hand tighten slightly against my back. "Years ago," I said. Claire smiled, but her eyes moved quickly to Evan. "I thought your name sounded familiar." Before I could answer, Evan stepped in. "Nat had a food job before Miles," he said. "She knows her way around a kitchen." A food job. I looked at him and he gave me the small smile husbands use when they want their wives to accept a reduction in public. Later, at the table, one of the clients mentioned that the appetizer tasting was excellent. Evan lifted his glass and said, "Well, Natalie helped me with the menu language. She's just good for cooking." He laughed. The table followed him halfway. Not fully. That mattered. Angela Price from HR looked down at her plate. Claire Donnelly did not laugh at all. A junior account manager named Jeremy cleared his throat like he wanted to disappear. The client smiled politely because clients often pretend not to see a marriage cracking in front of them. I felt heat rise in my face, then leave just as fast. There is a particular kind of insult that does not wound because it surprises you. It wounds because it confirms what you suspected someone had been thinking for years. I could have snapped. I could have embarrassed him back. I could have said, "Actually, Evan, half your last 3 proposals came from my old files." But I had spent too many years around kitchens to mistake a flare-up for heat control. Sometimes the worst thing you can do to a bad cook is stop him from serving what he already burned. So I smiled and said, "Funny." I thought food was the business tonight. Claire's mouth twitched. Evan did not like that. I felt it in the ride home before he said a word. "You made that awkward," he said as soon as we pulled onto the highway. I made it awkward? You know what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. He exhaled sharply. "Can we not do this? It was a joke." That's what people say when they want immunity for contempt. He glanced at me, irritated now. "See, this is why I don't bring you around work more. You take everything personally." "No, Evan, I took that professionally." He laughed once, short and mean. "Professionally? Natalie, you make school lunches and lasagna. Don't confuse helping me at home with being in the room where decisions get made." That sentence settled between us like a knife placed carefully on a table. I turned toward the window and watched streetlights slide across the glass. I did not answer because if I had, I would have said something I could not unsay. The next morning, a message arrived from a vendor I had not spoken to in years. Rosa Kim owned Wild Fork Produce and Provisions, a specialty vendor that supplied regional hotels and high-end caterers. Rosa had sharp eyes, sharper invoices, and the kind of loyalty you earned by paying on time and never blaming vendors for mistakes made in your own planning. Her email was brief. "Natalie, are you consulting for Marrow Lane now? I saw a draft sourcing structure for Briarstone that looks a lot like your old farm table revival system. If you are involved, happy to help. If not, I thought you should know." I read it twice. Then I sat down. Not because I was shocked that Evan had used my work. I was shocked that he had become careless enough for other people to recognize it. I opened the cabinet under the printer and pulled out the old laptop. It took 3 tries to remember the password. The machine hummed like it had been asleep under dust and resentment. I found the folder, Merrick House Concepts, archived. Farm Table Revival. There it was. My original spreadsheet. My notes, my vendor tiers, my allergy matrix, my cost bands, my service sequence. Even the language I had written about regional abundance without operational chaos. Then I opened the PDF Evan had emailed himself from our home account 2 months earlier. I had found it once by accident and assumed he had only wanted a reference. The title page had changed. The system had not. He had deleted my name from the footer, but not from the metadata. That was the first reveal. It hurt. My husband had laughed at the same work he had stolen from me. I called Rosa. She answered on the second ring. "I was hoping you would call. What did you see?" "A deck from Marrow Lane. Not the final, I think. Someone sent it around for vendor feasibility notes. Natalie, the bones are yours." I closed my eyes. Did my name appear anywhere? No. Did Evan's? A pause. Yes. There was a kindness in her silence that nearly broke me more than anger would have. "He told them this was his model," I said. "I can't speak to what he told them. But if you want my honest opinion, whoever built that deck understood the pretty part and missed half the safety part." I opened my eyes. "What safety part?" "The allergy matrix. The version I saw referenced your color code, but the cross-contact procedure was incomplete, and the vendor substitutions were outdated. If they use that live, somebody is going to be exposed." That was the second reveal. It explained. Evan had not stolen my work because he understood it. He had stolen the pieces that looked impressive and skipped the parts that protected people. When I hung up, I did something I had not done in years. I built a file, Original farm table revival spreadsheet created 8 years earlier. Version history. Email from Evan asking for inspiration. PDF copy he had sent himself. Rosa's email. Screenshots of vendor notes. Old LinkedIn recommendation from a Briarstone executive named Grant Holloway, back when he had worked for another hospitality group, and I had handled a difficult banquet conversion after a kitchen flood. Every file had a date. Every date had a story. Every story pointed in the same direction. By lunchtime, I understood the shape of the problem. This was not just a husband being cruel at dinner. This was not even just a husband taking credit. Marrow Lane was about to walk into a client event with incomplete operational material represented as Evan's work. A client with allergy-sensitive VIPs? A client who believed it was hiring competence. And the person who knew the system was sitting at home, being told she was just good for cooking. I forwarded nothing yet. That evening, Evan came home in a good mood. That always meant he believed he had won something. "Big week," he said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. "Briarstone dinner is locked." "I heard." He looked over. "From who?" "Rosa Kim emailed me." His face changed so quickly, I almost missed it. The smile did not disappear. It tightened. "Why would Rosa email you?" "She recognized my system." He set his briefcase down slowly. "Your system." "Yes." "Natalie, please don't start." There it was. The sentence men use when they have already started something and want women to carry the shame of noticing. You submitted farm table revival under your name. I adapted an old idea. You copied my cost bands, my vendor tiers, my allergy matrix, and my service notes. He gave a frustrated laugh. This is exactly what I mean. You have no idea how work functions now. Ideas evolve. People collaborate. Collaboration requires credit. Marriage is not a copyright dispute. "No," I said. "But work is." His jaw flexed. "Do not embarrass me this week." He said it quietly, which made it worse. Not "do not be hurt." Not "I'm sorry." "Do not embarrass me." I remember looking at him in the kitchen, where I had written half his professional confidence into existence, and feeling something old and soft finally close. "I won't embarrass you," I said. He relaxed too soon. "I won't need to." The Briarstone dinner was held 3 nights later in a private event space attached to one of Marrow Lane's partner restaurants. The room was all exposed beams, warm lights, polished concrete, and long tables set with linen runners. Evan loved rooms like that. They made mediocrity look curated. I had not planned to attend. Evan had not invited me. After our kitchen conversation, he had moved through the house like a man avoiding a dog he had kicked. Then at 4:12 that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Claire Donnelly. "Natalie Brooks?" "Yes." "This is Claire Donnelly from Marrow Lane. We met at the wine dinner." "I remember." "I hope this is not inappropriate. I have your number from the emergency contact sheet Evan submitted for the spouse dinner." That explained the careful tone. "What can I do for you?" A pause. "I need to ask a direct question. Did you build the original allergy matrix in the Briarstone proposal?" I looked at the folder open on my desk. "Yes." Another pause, this one sharper. "Did Evan have permission to submit it as his work?" "No." Claire exhaled through her nose. "All right, I need you to understand something. We have a problem tonight. Briarstone sent final guest details this morning. One of their board members has a severe shellfish allergy. The version Evan's team submitted references a cross-contact protocol, but the actual operational steps are missing. Our caterer is asking questions Evan cannot answer." That was the third reveal. It indicted. He had not only taken my work, he had taken it badly enough to put someone at risk. For a few seconds, I said nothing. Claire filled the silence. "I am not asking you to fix your husband's problem for free." That sentence mattered. It was the first time someone from his world had named the labor correctly. "What are you asking?" "I am asking if you are willing to consult tonight under your own name. Paid, documented, separate from Evan. If you say no, I understand, and we will stop service until we can verify safety. I thought about saying no. I thought about Evan at that wine bar, glass in hand, making me small. Then I thought about a stranger at a dinner table, trusting adults to know what was in the food. My anger had nothing to do with their safety. I'll come, I said, but I have conditions. Name them. My work is credited to me. Any use of my original system after tonight requires a written agreement. HR or compliance is present if Evan is questioned. And if anyone asks why I am there, no one calls me a wife helping out. Claire did not hesitate. Agreed. I changed into a black blazer I had not worn in years. It still fit, though differently. My body had changed after miles, after stress, after years of standing between the stove and everyone else's expectations. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw something I recognized. Not the woman Evan described. The woman I had been before he learned to benefit from my silence. Miles was at the kitchen counter eating cereal out of a mug because teenage boys are lawless when unsupervised. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To help with something at your dad's work." He watched my face. Miles had his father's dark hair, but my habit of noticing tone. "Is he in trouble?" "That depends on whether trouble means consequences." He nodded like that answered more than I intended. "Mom?" "Yes?" "See, you were never just cooking." I had to look away for a second. Children hear more than adults think. They store insults in rooms we never meant them to enter. When I arrived at the event space, Claire met me near the service entrance with Angela Price from HR and a man in a charcoal suit who introduced himself as Grant Holloway from Briarstone Hotels. Grant looked at me for 3 seconds and then smiled with recognition. "Natalie Brooks," he said. "Merrick House. You saved our San Juan retreat after the kitchen flood." Evan was standing 10 feet behind him. I watched the color drain from my husband's face. For years, Evan had spoken about his professional world as if it were a room I could never enter again. He had forgotten that some rooms keep records longer than men keep lies straight. Grant shook my hand warmly. "I wondered if you were involved. The system felt familiar." Evan stepped forward too quickly. "Natalie helped me polish a few things." Claire turned toward him. That is not what she just confirmed. The silence that followed was not loud. It was worse. It was administrative. Administrative silence means people are already deciding which policy applies. I did not enjoy it. That surprised me. I had imagined in some small wounded part of myself that seeing Evan exposed would feel like justice rushing through the room. Instead, it felt like watching a badly built shelf finally fall after years of leaning. Messy, necessary, sadder than satisfying. Claire moved us into the back office, away from the dining room where staff were resetting glasses. The office had a metal desk, a printer, 2 folding chairs, and a whiteboard covered in service timing notes. On the desk was a printed copy of Evan's proposal. My proposal, wearing his name. Angela placed a notebook on the table. "For the record," she said, "I am present because there appears to be a potential authorship and compliance issue related to client materials." Evan gave a tight laugh. "This is insane. Natalie and I are married. We talk about work." She gave input. "Input does not create metadata," I said. Claire looked at me. "You have the original files?" "Yes." I opened my laptop. File creation dates, version history, my notes from 8 years earlier, Rosa's email, the original allergy matrix with the missing cross-contact steps highlighted. The PDF Evan had sent himself. His submission. Same structure, same language, missing sections. Evan stared at the screen as if technology itself had betrayed him. "Nat," he said, voice lower now, "don't do this here." I looked at him. "Where would you prefer I do it? At home, where you can call it cooking?" Grant's expression hardened. I need to know whether tonight's service is safe. That was the right question. Not who was embarrassed. Not whose marriage looked ugly. Was the work safe? I turned the laptop toward him. Not as submitted, but it can be made safe if we remove the shared prep stations, change the appetizer sequence, isolate the shellfish service, replace the citrus dressing that came from the same prep line, and give Table 7 a separate runner. The caterer, a woman named Denise with a headset and no patience for corporate drama, appeared in the doorway. "Are you the person who actually understands this document?" I almost laughed. "Yes." "Good. I need you in the kitchen." No one asked Evan. For the next 90 minutes, I worked. Not like a wife, not like a victim, like a professional. I changed the plating sequence. I called Rosa and confirmed substitute produce. I rewrote the runner assignments. I caught a mislabeled sauce before it reached the line. I had Denise move shellfish prep to a separate station and change gloves between service groups. I gave the servers a 3-minute briefing that was clear enough for a new hire and strict enough for a hospital. The dining room never knew how close the event came to failure. That is the strange cruelty of good operations. If you do it right, people think nothing happened. Briarstone's guests ate safely. The food landed warm. The vegetarian entree did not look like punishment. The board member with the allergy thanked Denise personally. Grant watched the room with the expression of a man recalculating what he had almost purchased. Evan tried to approach me once near the service hallway. "We need to talk." "We are at work," I said. "Use my professional rate." His face went dark. "You're enjoying this?" "No, I'm protecting the guests. There's a difference. You wouldn't know because you only stole the parts of the work that looked impressive." He opened his mouth, but Denise shouted my name from the line, and I walked away before he could decide which version of himself to perform. After dessert, Marrow and Lane held a short debrief in the private room. Evan stood near the front with his tie slightly crooked, trying to recover the posture of a man who belonged there. Claire, Angela, Grant, Denise, and 2 account executives were present. I stood near the door because I still did not know what role I was allowed to occupy in a place that had benefited from my work without knowing my face. Evan began first. "We had a few operational adjustments tonight," he said. "But the team pulled together," Claire interrupted. "Actually, Natalie Brooks pulled the team together." The room went still. Evan's eyes flashed toward her. Claire did not blink. She corrected the allergy protocol, rebuilt the service sequence, confirmed vendor substitutions, and prevented a client safety issue created by an incomplete proposal submission. Angela added, "That proposal submission is under review." Evan let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "So now my wife is going to take credit for my account?" Grant spoke before I could. "Your wife is the reason this account is still in conversation." That sentence did what no argument in our kitchen ever had. It placed the truth outside our marriage, where Evan could not smother it with tone. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the panic underneath the anger. Not guilt, not yet. Panic because the audience had changed, and he did not control this one. Claire opened the printed deck. "Mr. Brooks, did you submit this system as your original work?" He swallowed. "It was developed collaboratively." "With whom?" Angela asked. He glanced at me. I said nothing. His silence answered for him. Angela made a note. Then Claire said the sentence that turned the knife cleanly. "Earlier this week, at a client dinner, you described Natalie as just good for cooking. Is that correct?" Evan looked around the room. Jeremy, the junior account manager from the wine bar, had joined the debrief and was staring at the floor. Angela's pen hovered. "It was a joke," Evan said. Grant's voice was flat. "It was a misrepresentation of expertise." I had never loved corporate language before that moment. Misrepresentation of expertise. Not cruelty, not sexism, not marriage drama. A professional category for a personal wound. Claire turned to me. "Natalie, Marrow and Lane would like to discuss a formal consulting agreement if you are willing, separately from Evan. Paid, credited, with ownership terms for any original material." Evan stared at her like she had spoken another language. "You can't be serious." "I am very serious," Claire said. "Because the client is serious." Grant nodded. Briarstone will not proceed with any program based on this model unless the actual author is involved and the safety protocols are complete. The work made him regret it then. Not because everyone shouted, because no one had to. Evan was removed from the Briarstone account before the week ended. Marrow and Lane opened a compliance review into his submission history. Angela interviewed people who had heard him mock me. Rosa provided a written statement about recognizing my system. Grant sent a formal note stating that Briarstone's continued interest depended on proper authorship and operational oversight. Evan came home late the night after the dinner and found me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had fixed so many of his problems, while he mistook proximity for ownership. He stood in the doorway for a while. "You humiliated me," he said. I looked up from the consulting agreement Claire had emailed. "No, Evan, I stopped helping you hide the source. You're my wife. I was your wife when you laughed at me. That was one stupid comment. No, the comment was the receipt. The purchase happened for years." He frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means the insult was not the beginning. It was proof of the system." He rubbed his face hard. For a moment, he looked older than 44. Smaller, too, though not in the way he had tried to make me small. He looked like a man realizing that charm has no operational value once the room asks for evidence. "I didn't think of it as stealing," he said quietly. I believed that. Not because he was innocent, but because entitlement often feels like normal life to the person benefiting from it. "You didn't have to think of it as stealing," I said. "You just had to make sure I thought of it as love." He sat down across from me. For a second, I remembered the early years. Miles as a toddler throwing peas across this very table. Evan laughing with real warmth. Me believing that being useful was another form of being loved. Then the memory passed. "What happens now?" he asked. I signed a short-term consulting agreement for the safety corrections and the Briarstone redevelopment. His head snapped up. "You signed?" "Yes." "Without talking to me?" I almost smiled. That is how independent work usually functions. He looked wounded, which would have mattered more if he had not built a career by using my independence without naming it. "And us?" he asked. I closed the folder. "I don't know yet, but I know this. I am separating our finances. I am reopening my professional accounts. And I am not reviewing another proposal, spreadsheet, menu, vendor list, or apology that has your name on it." He stared at the table. For years, that would have been the moment I softened. I would have felt guilty for his discomfort. I would have reached across the table. I would have translated his silence into remorse because I needed the marriage to mean something kinder than what it had become. This time, I let him sit with it. The next few months were not cinematic. That is important to say. There was no single scene where Evan fell to his knees and understood the full measure of what he had taken. Men like him rarely collapse in one honest moment. They negotiate with truth. They try to shrink it. They ask whether we can move forward before they have admitted what they did. Marrow and Lane completed its review. Evan kept his job, but not his title. His promotion disappeared. 2 prior proposals were corrected to reflect outside contribution. He had to complete ethics training, which I found both necessary and embarrassingly mild. Briarstone signed a limited contract with Marrow and Lane only after I signed as an independent consultant for the operational food safety and vendor structure. My rate was higher than Evan expected. Higher than I expected, too. The first invoice I sent under my own name made my hands shake. Not because I doubted the amount, because I had become so used to giving the work away that charging for it felt like rebellion. Claire paid it in 7 days. Rosa sent me a text with 3 clapping emojis and the words, "About damn time." Miles asked if he could help me design a logo. He was 15, which meant most of his emotional support came disguised as sarcasm. But one night he slid a notebook across the table with 3 terrible sketches and one surprisingly good one. "What do you want to call it?" he asked. I had been thinking about that for weeks. Not Brooks Consulting, not Natalie's Kitchen. Not anything that sounded like I was selling casseroles to neighbors because the world had taught me to apologize for being skilled. Table line operations, I said. Miles nodded. Sounds serious. It is. Good. He went back to his cereal, but his shoulders relaxed. That was when I understood one of the quietest damages Evan had done. He had not only taught me to doubt the value of my work, he had taught our son to watch a woman's talent become invisible inside marriage. I could not undo every year. I could make sure the next ones looked different. Evan and I separated 6 months after the Briarstone dinner. Not dramatically. Not because of one insult. Because once I stopped donating labor to the version of him that needed me small, there was not much marriage left standing. He told people we had grown apart. I let him. Not every lie deserves your oxygen, especially when the paperwork tells a cleaner story. I moved into a smaller house 3 miles from Miles's school. The kitchen had terrible lighting and outdated cabinets, but it had a wide wooden table near the window. I bought it used from a retired couple who said their grandchildren had outgrown Sunday dinners. The surface was scratched, uneven, and warm under my hands. It felt like a place where work could begin without being swallowed. My first private client was not Briarstone. It was a small coastal inn whose owner had heard from Rosa that I could make a breakfast program profitable without making it soulless. Then came a retreat center, then a vineyard. Then a hospital foundation gala where no one got poisoned, and the gluten-free dessert did not taste like cardboard. I still cooked. That surprised some people. They expected me to reject the kitchen because Evan had used it as an insult. But cooking had never been the shame. Being reduced was the shame. Feeding people had never been small. Making complex work look graceful had never been small. Knowing how to keep a room moving, a guest safe, a vendor honest, and a margin alive was not small. It was a profession. It had always been a profession. On the first anniversary of the Briarstone dinner, Miles came over for dinner. I made lemon chicken, roasted carrots, and a salad with herbs from pots on the back step. Nothing elaborate, just good food, cooked because I wanted to, not because someone expected me to prove my usefulness. Miles set the table without being asked. Halfway through the meal, he said, "Dad told me you ruined his career." I put my fork down. "What did you say?" I said, "If your career needed Mom to stay quiet, maybe it was already ruined." I looked at my son, at the young man he was becoming, and felt something in me settle. Not victory, something better. Proof that a pattern had broken. Later that night, after Miles left, I washed the dishes and dried the knives by hand, because good knives deserve respect. I stood in the kitchen listening to the quiet and thought about the woman at the wine bar who had smiled through humiliation, because she did not yet know how close the truth was to the surface. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her this. Do not be ashamed of the work people recognize only when it saves them. Do not confuse being needed with being valued. Do not let anyone turn your craft into a punchline because they are afraid of what your name would mean on the invoice. Evan was right about one thing. I was good for cooking. He just never understood that feeding people, protecting them, pricing the work, training the staff, managing the vendors, reading the risks, and making a room run on time had always been more than cooking. It was the work. And once the work finally spoke, he had nothing left to laugh at.